All right, guys. Well, this is week 9 or 10 of 12, I believe it is, and I have all your questions here that you wrote on your index cards, and I have Rabbi Eric Tokajer from Brit Om. Rabbi Eric, you want to say hi to everybody?
Hello, everybody.
And he has so graciously taken time out of his busy schedule to answer some of your questions that you asked. And so some of you wrote your names on these cards, and for those who wrote your names on these cards, I'm going to go ahead and say your names. I'm assuming you're giving me permission to do that. But let's go first and foremost. Rabbi Eric, this is from Brian and Tanya Meadows, and they ask, what boundaries do you put up to keep from burning out, but yet still helping people? Is question number one.
The biggest boundaries that I put up was people between me and other people. In other words, I take the plan that Moses' father-in-law set into place, and I don't try to handle everything myself. We have elders and we have people that do and get involved in many of the problems that arise from people's lives so that I don't have to personally be involved in every one of the issues. And then being able to limit those things that I do get involved in, it doesn't take as much of my time to deal with. And even after, when I get involved in something, a lot of times I'll do the initial part of it and then pass off to someone else to be responsible for making sure things get followed through and taken care of and stuff. So just having a good team is really the best boundary that I've found, because if you try to do it yourself, you're never going to have enough time. So setting up that boundary helps. And then there's certain things like Mondays are my night to spend with my wife. So unless there's somebody in the hospital or something, that's going to be there. And other times, and then taking time off, which is something I didn't do for 28 years. Were married 28 years before we took our first vacation.
Wow.
And then we actually started taking vacations. I woke up one morning and realized that normal people take vacations, and that just because I'm a rabbi doesn't mean I shouldn't. And so we started taking vacations and time off and a few days here and there to have for ourselves.
That's awesome. So naturally, you being one of the most visible, if not the most visible person in the synagogue and at Shabbat services and whatnot, just help me understand. People will probably and likely come to you with questions, whether they're doctrinal questions or life coach type questions, or have a need, a physical need, perhaps. What are your practical steps to delegate that if it calls for delegation to someone else?
I pass them off to, it depends on what it is. I pass them off to the people are in charge of those different areas. If it's a physical need and it's something I can just pray for real quick, I'll do that. And then other things I do is just say, that's really important. Call me Monday.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
So it's not something, this is important to me. We need to deal with this, but not right now. And I
Yeah.
also tell people, and I'm really honest about it, if you talk to me on Saturday morning, anytime during service, and expect me to remember whatever it was you said after Shabbat service, it's not going to
Yeah.
happen. So send me a text, send me an email, a voicemail on my phone, something, and I'll follow up with you. But if you talk to me Saturday morning, chances are I'm going to forget. I've got too much stuff. I'm trying to get my mind on the message, trying to be able to feed people. So those are some things, but I'll hand people off as quickly as I can to other people who handle those. If it's a children's thing, it goes to the children's department. If it's worship, it goes to the worship leader. If it's something one of the elders can help me with, I'll pass them off to the elders. So it just depends, but it's really a handoff kind of thing, but done with a way that it expresses the importance of the need, and
Mm,
not just, this isn't important enough for me to bother with.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have to let the person know that their need is important to you, but the best person to handle it at this moment is this person.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I appreciate your answer. The next question from Brian and Tanya is, what was your biggest challenge upon entering ministerial leadership, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Wow, my biggest challenge over, I don't know that I have an answer for that.
You
Um, I don't know
want
that.
me to send you a text with the question?
Well, no,
See.
no, I'm trying to think what my biggest challenge was. Um,
Mm,
I guess my personal biggest challenge is that I'm not an administrator.
mm,
So when I was trying to do all the administration stuff for our synagogue before we hired somebody, that was a huge challenge. But most of the other stuff, it wasn't that a big challenge. But administration, I'm terrible at.
mm.
Matter of fact, I made um, a schedule. I don't schedule my own appointments. I have my during the day. One of the ladies at the synagogue does it. My wife does all our personal ones because I scheduled myself to be in 3 different states at the same time. So when I say I'm bad at administration, I'm not kidding. When we hired Robin, who was our administrator, we were wondering how we were going to afford to pay her. We kind of hired her on faith that we'd be able to pay her. And when she went into my office to straighten up and file, because my file system was new on top, old on bottom. We
Nice.
didn't have file cabinets, we just had stacks, and when
Yeah.
she went through the stacks, she found $7,000 worth of checks that had never
Wow.
made it to the bank. So she found her first several months worth of paychecks,
Yeah.
in the first days she was in the office. So, overcoming those things and learning what you're not good at and then getting good people in those places help with that.
Mm,
But,
mm.
you know, being real that I'm not good at that. I can do it, but I'm not really good at it, and so we
Yeah.
hire people that can.
That's
That's
very
why
good.
we have 5 full-time administrative staff and
Wow.
2 rabbis.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we have people that are good at administration that do that part of things.
Like a well-oiled machine. Very good. The next question comes from Anonymous, and they ask, what made you decide to become a rabbi?
God,
Mm,
I didn't want to be. I had no desire to do this at all, but it was made very clear, by the Lord that this is what he had called me to do. And so
yeah.
I stepped into it. I really didn't want to. I wanted to do something that would make more money with a lot less headaches. And really, in like I worked in the grocery business for a number of years, and you can make more money putting fruit on a shelf in a produce market than you can working as a rabbi a lot of times. So
Mm,
it's not the
mhm.
money or the glory or any of those things. The Lord just really put it on my heart to do it and would not let me run away.
Yeah. Yeah. That inexplicable burden
Right.
that you have. Yeah. Yeah. Very good. This person asks us another anonymous question. Have you ever met a Jewish rabbi, and I'm assuming they're meaning like a Jewish rabbi who doesn't believe and follow Yeshua, and had to explain to him that you are a Messianic rabbi and what that is?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, I've had a really good relationship with the last 3 conservative rabbis in town, and I have coffee at least every other week with the local conservative rabbi who knows I'm Messianic. He actually had me come to his synagogue and
Mm,
teach a whole series on the Messiah recently, just a few months ago. It was on Thursday afternoon for 4 weeks in a row. So yeah,
wow.
I'm very open about it. Matter of fact, when I met the last 3 rabbis, the one before the last 3, I didn't have a real good relationship with at the conservative synagogue, but the last 3 I did. And I told him, I said, look, the bottom line is uh, you want every Jewish person in Pensacola area to come to your synagogue. I want every Jewish person in Pensacola to come to my synagogue. You don't agree with me, or you'd be coming to my synagogue. I don't agree with you, or I'd be coming to your synagogue. But I think that we can work together on issues that deal with the Jewish community.
Mm,
And if we can do that, then we can have coffee and be friends and all that. So, but yeah, I've expressed what I believe, and I've sat down at length with the local Chabad rabbi, and we've had coffee a number of times and talked about what we believe. I've talked to the local conservative rabbi, all 3 of the last ones, and I've had a very good relationship with all 3 of them. The one now I have regular coffee and visits with. Matter of fact, I just visited with him yesterday. Uh,
mm,
and then the one before, we actually had joint services
wow.
with their synagogue. We did some Torah together one year, and I've done Yom HaShoah, and we've done other events and movie nights and things like that. And very open about the fact that we don't agree on who the Messiah is, but also understanding that we are both Jewish congregations or
Mm.
Judaisms in what we
Yeah.
do. Matter of
Interesting.
fact, if I can find it, I'll read you a text chain because he sends me text every week for Shabbat Shalom and things like that. He just sent me invites to come to a couple events at their synagogue this week. They're having a music thing on Saturday night, and he wants our congregation to come. But this is an interesting series of texts that took place in at Yom Kippur. So let me find it real quick, and I'll read it to you. Okay, this is not. Okay, let's go to the next question, and then I'll come back to
Okay.
this if
Sure,
you
but it
feel like.
sounds like it sounds like building a coalition while having your differences transparent and out on the table,
Right.
um, not compromising on your principles,
Okay, here it
your
is. I found it.
beliefs. Sure, go ahead.
He sent me a text. I was just thinking about you. I wanted to ask you how Yom Kippur works in Messianic theology, but not today because you must be busy, which this is the just before Yom Kippur.
Hmm.
I answered, it works very similar to your theology. There's no temple standing, no atonement sacrifice possible, prayers, meditation, al-chet, etc. He said, God at Chatima Tova, may it be a meaningful day for you and your Kehila. I said, but also we believe that Yeshua ultimately symbolically fulfilled the offering just as the Kohen Gadol's death brought atonement for those in the cities of refuge.
Hmm.
Chatima Tova. He said, that's the part I was wondering. I said, I figured it was. He said, so you believe he was the ultimate sacrifice? I said, yes. And that was the end of the thread
Wow.
on that discussion. But that's the kind of discussions we have together with, matter of fact, we
Interesting.
met yesterday and we're talking about what we were each doing for Shavuot
Hmm.
and going back and forth on the discussion while we had coffee. So
Very nice. That's what interesting. I mean, and a really healthy relationship. I feel like with the normative Jewish community.
yeah. Now I will tell you, the Reform rabbi wouldn't spit on me if I was on fire.
Wow.
So
Interesting.
but the Chabad rabbi and the conservative rabbi in town, we get along.
Good. That's fascinating. Um, Here's the next question. What are your main goals for your congregation? In other words, uh, how, what would be success for you as a rabbi and your congregation?
Success for my congregation would be for everyone there to be healthy in their faith,
Mm,
whether that's 10 people or 1,000 people. Um,
mm,
you can have a lot of people and not be really successful because the goal of a shepherd is to have a healthy flock, and you can have a really big congregation with a lot of unhealthy sheep.
yeah.
Uh, and so um, I just want everybody to be healthy in Messiah. I want their faith to be strong, and I want them to be following the Great Commission, going out and reaching out other people.
Mm.
And if that happens, I'll think we're successful.
And it's interesting as a leader, you think part of you thinks someday we will achieve that, someday we will be there, but there's always this negative attrition of people and positive attrition of people who are attending and part of your
Right.
congregation.
When
And you will never, the work is never really complete
Yeah, when
until the
you
kingdom
realize
comes.
that a synagogue is an emergency room in a
Hmm.
hospital,
Yeah.
and so everybody who comes in is sick in some way. Your
Hmm.
goal is to get them healthy, but healthy people then go out. They don't stay in the hospital.
Yeah.
And so they can become workers in the hospital and then start helping other people to be healthy. But if they walked in the door, they were sick. And so the goal is to get them healthy and then let them become servants that are helping other people come healthy, or to go somewhere else as a healthy person, and
Yeah.
or the other group is those that die,
Mm.
and we don't want that to happen, but it does.
Yeah. Very neat. All right. This is we have just three questions, maybe 4 or 5 questions remaining here.
Cool.
Um, when you let's see, when you are the only leader and someone challenges you on something, what is your process to respond to that challenge?
It depends on the challenge, and it depends on the attitude of the challenge. If somebody challenges me respectfully on something, I'll spend as much time with them as necessary. The end result will either be that they will line up with what I believe, or I will change to what they believe, or they will leave. Those are really the three options. And people have to understand, for all of us, and it doesn't matter who is in leadership. But I was raised in a traditional Jewish home, so I accepted Messiah. So I'm willing to change if the
Mm.
evidence is sufficient to cause me to do that. So if
Yeah.
somebody brings up an objection or challenges me on something, it's possible they're right. And
Yeah.
so I have to be open to that possibility that even though I'm the rabbi, they might be right about something. And so then I change and adjust. I'll give you an example of that. We used to do these large Passover Seders, and we used to do them on the second night of Passover, which meant that we would be preparing to have the Seder during the holy day,
Mm-hmm.
because you have Pesach, and then you have the holy day, and then you have the second night. So we were doing a tremendous amount of work
Mm. On the
getting everything
Sabbath.
prepared on the Sabbath in order to celebrate Seder. And so somebody came up and said, Rabbi, I don't think we should do it on this day, and here's why. And I considered it, and then we changed to where we would have our Seder on the third night.
Mm.
And it was a reasonable challenge, not something I had paid much attention to. I wasn't. It wasn't a concern. It hadn't been brought up, but it was somebody challenged, said, Rabbi, we're violating the Shabbat. We
Mm.
shouldn't do this much work, even to have a Seder. It's different if you're having a home Seder where there's 8 or 10, 12 people at your house. But when you're preparing a meal for 400 or 500 people, it's not the same, and we shouldn't do this on the Shabbat. So they
Mm.
challenged me, and we adjusted what we were doing. So knowing that it's possible that somebody might have something that's meaningful, that's real, that we need to adjust, we have to be open to. On the other side of things, if you're absolutely certain you're right, then you have to stand for that, and then the person either has to adjust themselves, or we explain to them that we love them very much, but we may not be the home for them.
Yeah, I think there's I get that on time to time. There's the person who you can sense there's humility in their, not really challenge. It doesn't even come off that way. It's a question. It's a conviction that they are beginning to develop, and they pose it to you in a humble
Right,
way where you can just tell that there is from a true motivated out of concern, and but then there's the true challenge of your intellect, of your authority, of your position, and it's
right,
usually a question that is they think they already know the answer to it, and they're pretty
right.
certain of that, but they're doing it to try to take your legs out from under you. They're asking the
Exactly.
question to prove to you, oh, you don't know the answer to that. Well, I do, and that's why you are. Ultimately, it boils down to
I
a
should be
spirit,
in charge, not you.
exactly, a spirit of rebellion, a spirit of Korach, right?
Right.
And in those instances, for Gabe Rutledge, if I encounter that, it's just to pull a play out of Moses' book and just fall on my face and say, I'm not, I am a broken sinner in need of salvation, and I am learning, but uh, God has called me to do what I do, and it's just reminding them that, hey, you don't want this position. It's reminding them that
Right.
that Yeshua never calls us to have perfect theology, and he calls us to make disciples and to be the shepherd of a body, of a flock, and that often looks like picking up your phone at 3 o'clock in the morning to pray with someone,
Right.
more so than it does uh, having the perfect theology and the answers for every
Right. And
question.
and one of the challenging issues in dealing with this is that when you release someone to go somewhere else, you have to do so in a way that they know that they would be welcome to come back if they
Hmm.
aligned with. In other words, I have several people that come to our congregation now that left because they didn't agree with something and then found out that they were
Hmm.
wrong, but because we didn't hate them out,
Hmm.
they felt comfortable coming back without having to, swallow too much pride and crawl their way back begging in, which isn't how we should be with people. And
Yeah.
so, we deal with a lot of people that, many people that come, especially from the church side of things, into Messianic Judaism, come because they found something that was wrong in the church. And so, a lot of times, the pendulum swings so far that they're looking for everything wrong everywhere, and they become
Hmm.
open to false teachings and false things going on. And but they have honest hearts, but they're
Hmm.
fully convinced that everybody has lied to them, and they're now the only arbiter of truth and the only one that can understand the
Hmm.
scripture, and they're doing it to guard themselves against the hurt
Yeah.
that they went through. And so when the pendulum starts to swing back to where they do get balanced and they get a peace and overcome that anguish and that hurt, they have to have a place they can go to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And before I forget, we've got one more question before I forget. And guys, I have not brought this book in, nor have I made you read it, but I really highly recommend this book that Rabbi Eric wrote. It's called Oi, How Did I Get Here? It's 31 Things I Wish Someone Had Told Me Before Entering the Ministry. And I read this book sitting in a park with Stacy, even before stepping into leadership at Dothan Messianic Fellowship, and I gleaned so much wisdom from it. I need to reread it, but unfortunately, I have loaned mine out to, I think, Patrick, and then it went to Jeremy, and then it went to Anthony, and I don't know who has it now, but they've all read it, and they thought the same thing. So, guys, if you're listening to this, check out that book. How I looked on Amazon, and
It's
it's
on
like 50,
Amazon. It
it's like,
should.
let me see. It says on here it's like $58,
No, no,
but I think
no.
that's okay. That must be the wrong link.
Yeah, if you go to rabbierict.com and then click on it through there, you'll find it
Here it
for the
is.
normal price.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a Kindle edition for $6, and then the paperback for $17. So it's well worth it, whether or not you get the Kindle or but this is definitely a book. If you're looking to be someone like Proverbs 15:22 and have a multitude of counsel, Rabbi Eric, you've been around the block a few times, and um, I tell people on a regular basis, you are one of the few people I let speak um, authoritatively into my life and into doctrine that I teach. And when you talk, I stop and I listen. And it's good to have and be surrounded by people like that have um,
Yeah,
so much experience
yeah,
under them.
every good leader should have several people above him
Mm-hmm.
and several people below him that
Mm-hmm.
both speak into his life. In other words, it's important to have people that have more experience than you that speak into your life, but it's all just as important to listen
Mm-hmm.
to the sayings of those with less experience because they
Yeah.
may see something that you don't see, because the more experience you get, the more settled you get
Mm-hmm.
in things. So it's really important to have people above and below in
Mm-hmm.
education and experience, because usually the most innovative things come from the people with no experience but a lot of energy.
Yeah. 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 I've seen that case. Yeah, I've seen that firsthand. That's really good. Um, well, good deal. Yeah, you guys check out that book. And then our last question from our little group here has, Um, what has been the biggest surprise you've had to deal with in ministry? The biggest surprise.
The biggest surprise, wow, again, I'm not
See
sure. I
how
think that
incendiary masks can be.
the biggest surprise is probably that most of the significant hurts in
Mhm.
my ministry came from people I invested the most in.
Wow.
usually you think that your biggest problems would come from people that you didn't have relationship with, that you didn't spend years with, that you didn't spend a lot of time with, that you weren't in a car with for hours or traveling with and all. But most of the significant hurt has come from people that I invested the most time and energy in. So if going into ministry, that wasn't something that I would have expected. I would have expected that
Mm.
my hurts would come from the enemy outside the camp, not the
Yeah.
enemy within. It's interesting that when we read the book of Ephesians and it talks about put on the
Mm.
whole armor of God, if you keep that in context of the book of Ephesians, everything in the book of Ephesians is about infighting. It's about things going on within the community. So when it says put on the whole armor of God that you might withstand the wiles of the devil, it's talking about in dealing with people within your community, not
Wow.
enemies from outside the camp.
Sheesh. Yeah, that's so. When you say you've experienced hurt from people that you've poured into and spent the most time with, does that come through abandonment, betrayal, or does it come through
Betrayal, abandonment, those
a
kind of
lack of
things. All yeah,
conflict resolution of other people in the congregation,
right.
so they'll leave, that sort of thing?
Right, or rebellions. If you think
Mm.
about it, Korach was one of Moses' closest friends,
Mm.
and yet he rose up this whole rebellion against him. They were
Mm.
so family. It's and those are the most hurtful things. You realize that the people you don't have any relationship with can't really hurt you.
Mm. Yeah.
It's the ones that you do. The ones that are outside your circle of influence are people that doesn't matter really what they say. You don't have value in that.
Yeah. Wow.
So the ones closest to you can cause you the most pain.
So why continue to do it? Why do you continue to subject yourself to this pain? And you know.
Because I haven't been released not to.
Mm.
Yeah, it's kind of like I tell people I love Sarasota. Sarasota is my growing up hometown. I was raised up north, but we moved to Sarasota. I love Sarasota. I love the people. I love the beach. I love the way the town looks. I love the houses. I love everything about it. But I live in Pensacola because this is where God called me to.
Mm.
And I'm going to stay here until He releases me, and which He may never do. But it's the same thing with ministry. God hasn't released me to do something else or be somewhere else. And because I don't like the chastisement that comes from not doing what God says,
Mm.
I choose to try to obey.
Mm.
Plus, the
I'm
truth
gonna
is, I
ask.
love what I do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's the thing is it's punctuated by times of great joy and reward and peace, knowing that you're obeying and walking in the fulfillment of God's desires on your life.
Right.
Um,
And the truth is, and something just to add real quick is if you have 150 people and two of them are causing you problems, we tend to focus on the two and not
mhm.
the 148 that love you and are supportive and and we
Yeah,
get caught up in that, right? So it's important. It's also important to note that we're the under shepherd, not the shepherd.
yeah,
And when the shepherd goes after the one, we're not the shepherd.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember you saying that in the past. That was kind of a
Yeah.
paradigm shift for me. Is yeah. Um, let me ask you. This is a Gabe Rutledge question now, not on one of the
Okay.
cards. If you could go back to Eric Tokajer of 25 years ago, you're just stepping foot into ministerial leadership, and you got it in a time machine and were able to go back and visit yourself, and you could only spend 60 seconds with yourself, what wisdom would you impart to Rabbi Eric of 25 years ago?
I think I would tell myself to focus on the things I was good at and get good people to do the things that I'm not much earlier in the process.
Mm.
I can't tell you how many people I let down or got discouraged because I didn't do something that I could have done. How many times I would notice somebody hadn't been at synagogue when 6 months had gone by instead of 1 week,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden realize they weren't there because I wasn't taking attendance or I wasn't paying attention because I was focusing on things. So hiring good people and putting them in, or assigning, whether hiring or just assigning
Yeah.
people to do the things they're good at, and not try to be so prideful that I wasn't honest about what I was good at, honest to myself
Yeah. Yeah.
about it.
Interesting. Interesting. Very good. Well, guys, I appreciate all your questions, and I hope that this time spent with Rabbi Eric has been edifying and insightful and challenging to you all. And Rabbi Eric, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to pour into our little class here that we have going on. And I'm excited to see what they do for the kingdom and the body of Messiah and how they can lead and teach within it as well. But thank you again.
Wonderful. And you guys know that Jonathan and Catherine had their baby, and he's
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
fine. And the
yeah.
Brit is this Sunday at 7:30. So be praying for Jonathan that he doesn't pass out.
Yeah, I saw photos of little Gabriel Eric. He's a beautiful child.
Yes, he is a beautiful child. Eric Gabriel.
All right. Well, have a good
Shalom.
night. Shalom. Bye.